Thank you very much. That was great, Senator. I'm just going to ask you a few questions. I want to start about, you were talking about Iran. Now, after the Iranian attack on the Saudi energy facilities in September, you said President Trump's, quote, measured response to Iran shooting down of our drone in June was clearly seen by the Iranian regime as a sign of weakness, adding it is imperative that we take decisive action to deter further aggression by the Ayatollah and his henchmen. Well put.
Yeah, he didn't like that too much.
Yeah. What sort of decisive action do you think the United States should be?
Well, let's get back to the concept. I applaud the president for trying to have him. I don't know if there's a term for measured response in Farsi. I mean, I'm not an expert on Farsi, but clearly this doesn't translate. I thought it was a pretty smart move, even though I disagreed with it. Okay, a drone, if we kill 10 or 12 people, whatever it will be, the Ayatollah will be in a box, and I don't want to go down that road if I have to, so I'll back off here a little bit. Then they hit the largest oil field in the world with a fairly sophisticated attack. To me, that says a lot about what they're thinking. They're thinking we're all talk, and that was a pretty risky move. And my fear is if we don't respond sooner rather than later, they're going to get more aggressive. What I like about Israel, clarity. You hit them, they're going to knock the hell out of you. Because if you don't do that, you just wind up losing your sovereignty and your ability to survive in the region. So I think it's now time to put on the table, all bets are off. Because since the Iran nuclear agreement, what did I learn growing up in the back of a liquor store in South Carolina? If somebody's threatening to cut your throat, don't buy them a knife. So the $150 billion is not going to roads and bridges and hospitals. So now I think it's time for the United States, not just Israel, who hits them in Syria continuously, to send a clear signal that you're not going to do this anymore. And the people in Iran have just about had it with these thugs. So I told the president, pour it on. Stand up for the people who are out in the streets and say you're right to demand more from your government. And stand up to the Ayatollah before people in the region believe that they have to go it alone. When the president threatened to get out of Syria, I went crazy because I thought that would be a huge mistake, letting ISIS come back and Iran come in and take the oil fields. To his credit, he readjusted his policies. The one thing that I like most about President Trump is he actually does listen. I could never get President Obama to change his mind. So President Trump readjusted his policies in Syria, and now I'm hoping we have options on the table at a time of our choosing to let the Iranians know that there's a new sheriff in town when it comes to President Trump.
Completely agree with you. Let me ask you about another signal that we could send to the Iranians, and this is something I spoke about it actually at the beginning of the dinner, which was to help. You were a critic of the MOU. You didn't think it was enough. Would this now be also a good time to try to see how we could bolster Israeli military capabilities? Not necessarily spending more money, it could be financing and so on.
Are you listening, Ron?
Yeah, that's what we're...
Okay, BB's always been a squish in my eyes. No. BB is one of the strongest leaders in the history of the state of Israel. I respect him a lot. He wanted to work with the Obama administration. I appreciate the fact that the Obama administration was going to do a long-term agreement with the state of Israel, $30-something billion, but here was the problem. Before this MOU, the missile defense money was not included. So for the first time, we locked in the missile defense spending at $500 million. The reason I didn't want to do that is because you don't know what the future holds when it comes to the threats. Lebanon is a rocket launching factory, literally. Now the Golan, the Syrian border is deteriorated. There's another front where they're receiving rockets. And look what happened in Gaza just this past week. So the reason I didn't want to put the missile defense money in the MOU is I thought that was the program that needed to be flexible, because my fear was it wouldn't become a floor, it would become a ceiling. And I think it has. Under the terms of the MOU, Israel feels like they can't come up here and ask for more money unless the administration gives them the go-ahead. And our allies in Israel are very appreciative of congressional support, but they don't want to do anything to be seen as breaking an agreement. The reason I thought it was a bad deal is not just because of the money amount, it's because it locks us in to $500 million unless somebody's willing to give them more. The reason I want to give Israel more this year is because they need the money more this year than they did last year. How many of you believe the threats regarding missiles to Israel has gone up in the last 3 years, not down? Okay. So what I'm going to suggest to the appropriators, given the threats coming from Gaza, Lebanon, now Syria, we need to increase the missile defense funding above the MOU level. And here's the simple message I want to send. Every time the Iranians, through their proxy, or any other radical Islamic group, decides to attack Israel, I want the United States to do more, not less.
I have one more Israel question before I turn to Turkey. We appreciate your speech, and as I said in introduction, it's terrific working with you.
Sorry.
On the U.S.-Israel Mutual Defense Pact. One thing I'd like to ask, because people ask me this, what do you think the prospects are for bipartisan support? Because you need 67 votes in the Senate.
Number one, you got to get buy-in to the terminology. I want to shop it around to Democrats who spend a lot of time on this issue. First, you got to get a government in Israel. Small detail. Like, who's going to be prime minister, and are you for it? So I think the IDF is very much for the relationship if it's done right. Extraordinary circumstances, exceptional circumstances, not taking away the sovereignty of Israel. But the first thing you got to do is you got to get a government that's recognized by the people as legitimate, and they've got to want it. The day that the government in Israel, blue, white, Likud, all different factions, say this is the common view of the state of Israel, then I think it's easier for Democrats and Republicans to work together. Because if it's not bipartisan over there, it's not going to be bipartisan here. So step one is to form a government in Israel in my lifetime. I hope the third time is a charm if we go down that road. But once that's done, to talk to this new coalition government, and it's going to be a coalition, don't you think? I've learned more about, Israeli politics. I couldn't be orthodox. Too many rules. I'm a Baptist, and that's saying a lot because we got a lot of rules. But Israeli politics make what we do like simple over here. So I don't know how anybody gets to 61 anytime soon, but that day will come. Then we'll be talking with the new government. Do you want this? And if they say they want it with a unified voice, then I think the pieces begin to fall in place here. And I need your help. To all the people who have stuff on your shoulders, I need you to stand behind me to let the American political system know from a military point of view, this is a good deal for America. Without the military, retired and current U.S. military, it'd be a hard sell.
Absolutely. Let me turn to Turkey. Junta has an Eastern Med Task Force co-chaired by General Chuck Wald, Ambassador Eric Edelman, and many prominent generals and admirals and civilian experts. So Turkey is very important to us, as I know it is for you. You said in the summer, as recently as summer, you referred to Turkey as a strategic U.S. ally.
Yes.
And I was curious, after Turkey's invasion of Syria, if it changed your view.
Well, I met Erdogan last week. That was fun.
Yeah.
I don't think he's used to pushback. Maybe I'm just overreacting here. But, so, what time is it, by the way? Okay, good. So, the bottom line is the president was incredibly smart, I thought, to bring 5 members of the Senate to talk to the president of Turkey. I can't ever remember that being done before. I think what President Trump was trying to explain to President Erdogan is civics. I don't know what the parliament like in Turkey, but I don't think it's much of an impediment to what Erdogan wants to do. Trump says, you need to meet these people, they're crazy. And, and they don't like you very much. So there were 5 of us, and I think we had a unified voice to President Erdogan. We want a good relationship. You're a member of NATO. I consider you a strategic ally until you're no longer a strategic ally. If you buy the S-400 and you activate it, it's over. You're not going to get the F-35. We're not going to let you be in the F-35 program when you're using an S-400 system. That ain't happening. Now you decide. We'll try to make it a win-win where you get the Patriot to replace the S-400, that we'll do it in a fashion that will be dignified and that we'll both win. So I talked to Erdogan 3 times. I went to Istanbul I was the closest thing to they had a friend in Congress. President Erdogan is not very popular in the Congress. He's seen as not a good guy, okay? But he is the president of Turkey, and I want this to be a win-win. The YPG elements inside of Syria are definitely associated in the past with the PKK. So when Ash Carter and Dunford testified about our Syrian Democratic Forces strategy, it was mostly Kurds, and said, aren't you going to run into a problem with Turkey? Because the YPG in Turkish mindset is an offshoot of the PKK. They couldn't find anybody else to fight, so the Kurds stepped up to the table along with some Arabs. And without the YPG SDF elements, the caliphate would still be standing. We lost 8 guys in 4 years, God bless the 8, but we'd have lost hundreds if we'd had to go and take the caliphate. So we owe it to the SDF forces to not abandon them. And I beg the president, don't you go into Syria. Let's see if we can find a demilitarized zone where the YPG heavily armed elements are backed off from your border, and there's somebody between you and them that we all trust to recognize your legitimate national security concerns, but not put us in a box, Michael, where we have to abandon an ally. He chose poorly. He did something that nobody in America can do: unite the Congress. I told him, I said, I don't know how you did it, but you've done something none of us can do. Look at the vote in the House. And it wasn't about the S-400, it was about the incursion. So 2 things are going to happen. We're going to find a way to resolve the S-400 issue mutually beneficial to both of us. Then we're going to try to roll back the incursion into Syria, create a safe buffer zone between the Turkish border and the YPG elements that all of us believe is viable. We're not going to allow the ethnic cleansing of 300,000 Kurds along the Syrian border. We'll try to make it a win-win. But Michael, if we don't get the S-400 right, then nothing else will work, and the Senate will pass the House version of sanctions by 95 votes. And that will be the beginning of the end of the relationship between us and Erdogan's Turkey. And as much as people are uncomfortable with Erdogan, I hope we don't go down that road. But that's where we're headed.
Thank you. Well, you took my next question, but let me ask you a couple more. Are there, first of all, what do you make of the fact that Baghdadi's compound was so close to the Turkish border, but that our forces staged the operation from Erbil in Iraq?
Well, so here's the big theme for me. You may be tired of fighting radical Islam, but they're not tired of fighting you. We can't build a wall between us and ISIS. Makes sense to have one on the southern border here where it's needed. But our forward deployed forces, partnering with indigenous forces, are our wall. So if you pull the plug on Syria, then the SDF elements that helped us win the day are going to be exposed by Turkish incursion, which happened, and ISIS will come back because The Kurds can't fight Turkey and look out for ISIS all at the same time. Iran's going to come in and take the oil fields. So when I mentioned oil fields, the light went on. So now we went from having like 5 guys with a rifle to 2 tank platoons inside of Syria guarding the oil. So it's my hope that this new counter-ISIS strategy centered around denying the enemy the benefits of the oil reserves and keeping Iran out will be more sustainable than the other approach. Al-Baghdadi was in a very ungoverned spot. I asked the question, was it reasonable to believe that Turkey knew he was there and did nothing about it? And our military said, no, this was a pretty remote region. Idlib is very dangerous. The one thing I'll say positive about Turkey, if it wasn't for their pushing back, Assad and Russia would go into Idlib tomorrow and their 3 million people could get slaughtered. So there's a lot at stake if we lose Turkey, but we're not going to keep Turkey at all costs. So here's what I think happened with Baghdadi. I think President saw the benefit of forward deployed forces. We didn't leave from Virginia. We left from inside the region. And the capability we've acquired on the ground in Syria was key. The intel from the Kurdish forces sealed Baghdadi's fate. So I think the president saw the benefit of forward deployed forces and a payoff of a long-term relationship. And that was a game changer for him. The one thing that I think the president sort of was surprised was that people didn't stand up and cheer when he said, we're getting out of Syria. Christian conservatives are the anchor tenant of the U.S.-Israel relationship on my side. I'm a Baptist. And every Baptist from the time they're this tall has been taught God blesses those who bless Israel. And it is the foundation of the U.S.-Israel relationship, at least on our side of the aisle. And the pushback from the Christian conservative community about us abandoning the Kurds was overwhelming. So I've never felt better about the president understanding the benefit of alliances in the region, the payoff of forward deployed forces, than I do right now.
I have one last question. Do you think it would help gain leverage with the Turks and also bolster the U.S. position in the region if we boosted our relationship with Greece and our military presence there?
Well, I don't think the heart of Turkey is through Greece. I mean, I'm just making kind of an observation there that they probably... So I talked to the Greek ambassador today, by the way. Yeah, where is he? Yeah, so your new government's really stepped up here, man. We really appreciate it. They're very all in with joint exercises. So Turkey's complicated. Do you agree? I mean, like Bibi and Erdogan are not going on vacation anytime soon. So Erdogan did win. Probably wasn't the most perfect election, but he has a certain level of popularity. But there's pushback inside of Turkey. This Istanbul vote was very interesting to me. So what I've tried to do is play the ball as it lies. You know, President Trump's noted for that. So here's how the ball lies in Turkey. You've got a pretty good U.S. military relationship. That's still pretty strong. You've got a president of Turkey who is trying to recreate influence, sometimes at our expense. So he's been given a choice by President Trump. We can go from $25 billion of trade to $100 billion if we get the S-400 right and we can undo the damage done by the incursion in Syria. They can get back in the F-35 program, and we can have a partnership that's more beneficial and more sustainable. If we can't get the S-400 right, and we don't roll back the incursion into Syria, then the Congress will speak with overwhelming numbers to sanction the Turkish economy at a time when the Turkish economy needs growth, not sanctions. And this is all going to happen in real time. I told our friends in Turkey through an intermediary today that we're supposed to leave by December the 20th. town here. I'm hoping to have an answer on the S-400 by then, because Congress cannot afford to leave town, leaving the Turkish issue unresolved. We have to get this one right. Other people want the S-400. They're looking at what happens to Turkey. The president tried to keep Erdogan from coming in, but he went in anyway. I told President Trump, in the Mideast, there's no such thing as a yellow light. It's either red or it's green. It's real red or it's real green. And the subtlety didn't work. And if we don't get Turkey right, we're going to unleash holy hell throughout the region. If we get Turkey right, where it's mutually beneficial, this thing could turn out to be a reset moment. But I can promise everybody in this room, the Congress wants a strategic relationship, but we stand ready if we have to lower the boom on Turkey.
Senator Graham, I want to thank you very much. God bless you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.